When it comes down to it, divorces and property settlement and children's matters really comes down to settling or not settling. So today we're going to be talking about reasons why people settle and reasons why people don't settle, so that you can have a look at where you're in this journey and checking to see if some of the reasons why you're not settling or considering settling are good or bad reasons. Welcome, Mum.
Hello, Laura. Hi, everyone.
Now, can you just do a disclaimer for us yourself there, Mum?
Oh, my goodness, what a massive disclaimer. So the information that we're going to talk about today in the podcast is really just a general discussion. We're just looking at reasons why some people settle and some people don't settle. So don't be guided by this. Don't use this lesson to make yourself to go and therefore settle or not settle, okay? Because we can't possibly know your situation. So This is just, in my experience, the things we've learned over the years, or I've heard over the years as well. And Laura and I have heard in terms of people with emails and stuff. All this is meant to do is to have a discussion about those reasons. And if you think it'll apply to you, go and get some legal advice.
Hello, I'm Laura Furiosi, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years' experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom.
All right, so Mum, today we're going to talk about reasons people settle and reasons why people don't settle. And we're wanting the listeners today to just listen to the different options and the different experiences other people have had to maybe get inside the head of their ex and maybe get inside of the head of themselves. And we're going to start with reasons people do settle. And then we're going to talk about the good reasons why people settle. And then we're going to talk about the reasons why people settle on bad offers. So the number one reason you said people usually settle, and the good reason, is their lawyer recommends it to them and gives them good reasons. So can you just quickly describe the bright, shiny reason that people settle?
Okay. So it's important, we're talking about property settlement here rather than parenting. Some of the things may apply, but not all of them. So if you've got a lawyer that you trust, and if that lawyer tells you that you've got a good case and this is a good offer or whatever, and you should settle on this amount, then people do. They follow their lawyer's advice as if the lawyer has their client's confidence. If not, then they might need to ask their lawyer to put it in writing, put some cases or get a second opinion. And then if someone who does law all the time and is in the courts all the time tells you straight out, this is what's going to happen, well, people believe them and settle.
Is it fair to say that sometimes people get nervous about settling based on what their lawyer said, and they sometimes go and get a second opinion?
Yeah, lots of people do. And, like as doctors, people go to doctors and then they get a second opinion. This is very important stuff. So, yes, if you're not confident in your lawyer or it seems wrong to you, go and get a second opinion. If you mention it to the second lawyer that it's a second opinion and you don't want them to disclose it to your current lawyer, they can do that. They'll be quiet about that, but they can give you the rundown. And if they come up with the same sort of idea, number or position, then you could confidently go back to your other lawyer and say, yes, I accept.
Okay, so we probably should have defined it at the start that settling means that you and your ex are agreeing on some sort of property settlement where it's all going to be filed as a consent order in the court. That's settling, yeah?
Yep, that's settling, or in a financial agreement that doesn't get filed. And often it's a compromise usually for both people. It's usually a little bit less than one of them wanted and a little bit more than the other wanted to pay. But it's a compromise. It's a settle.
And I guess that's why the term win isn't used anywhere. It's not winning and it's not losing. It's settling. And the only time you're going to get winning and losing, I think that feeling is probably if you go to court.
Yeah, that's right. And even then, most people come out of court dissatisfied. Either they don't feel that their side was properly listened to, even if they get the right outcome, like even if they get more than they asked for or everything they asked for, if they don't feel heard, they come out dissatisfied. Right. So, yeah, it's not really winning.
Okay. So looking at it, we're talking about settling for property settlement. And the number one reason people do tend to settle is because their lawyer recommends it and gives them good reasons. And if they feel nervous about that, some of them go and get a second opinion from a lawyer. And we have a great episode on questions to ask your lawyer when choosing one, because what we've highlighted there really is you need to be able to trust your lawyer to be able to tell you that you're getting a good offer. And if you don't trust your lawyer, if you don't have a good relationship with them, it's going to be really hard to settle and make that reason to settle because your lawyer told you to.
That's right. Yeah. So one way of double checking is I always say to ask your lawyer why you should settle or why you shouldn't settle, and ask them to put it in writing with some case law. And then if they can do that, then, they probably are on the money and you should listen to your lawyers.
Now, the next reason you said people settle is that if the case is risky and the cost of going to court is too high compared to your lowest expected entitlement.
Good job. Yes.
So can you explain that?
All right. It's just a cost-benefit analysis, okay? So if you're going to court and you're fighting over $50,000 and it's going to cost you $20,000 to go, and you might not get the 50,000, you want 50, they want you to have 20, and you might get 20 or 30, and it's going to cost you all this money to go to court. Well, then, you just don't, do you?
Well, it's up to you. Every situation is
different. But this is what people have told us and what I've seen. The other case, though, is if it's millions in the property pool, people are prepared to go to court for 1%, because, it's a couple of 100,000. 1% of 2 million is $200,000, and it's going to cost you 50, 60 to go to court. It's still kind of worth it as long as you've got a reasonable case. So it's just working out where you fit in that dynamic, I guess.
So basically what you're saying is these people, they, instead of going to court, they're looking at it and they're going, well, the cost of court, the cost of my lawyers, all of that is going to gobble up pretty much what I was going to potentially win anyway. Or the chance of me getting it is really low and they've got to weigh it up. So I guess anybody in that situation, they need to sit down and have a really hard think and actually put numbers down on paper and talk to their lawyer, talk to financial advisors, whatnot, and really have a think about it. Because sometimes people, I think, they really can't see past trial. They can't see past divorce. They can't see past settlement. But, you could burn all your money in legal fees and then get to the end and go, wait, I've got to live the rest of my life. and know they've had their blinkers on the whole time. So I guess it's a little wake-up call to anybody.
Yes.
I don't try to scare people. And of course, sometimes you do have to go to court because we know we're talking about property, but for children's matters, sometimes you're willing to spend everything, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about reasons people settle, and it's sometimes because the case is risky and the cost is high compared to the lowest expected entitlement. So something to think about, guys, something to mull about in your mind.
So in the early days of law, I don't know if you remember my office, Laura, I had bookshelves of legal cases, hundreds and hundreds of law reports.
Yeah.
And every one of those cases, both parties thought they were going to win. Otherwise, they wouldn't have spent the money and they wouldn't have gone. So when you read a case, it's never certain that you will win. There's always a risk. Something may happen on the day. Your conduct might upset the judge. So all of those things. So I don't want anyone to get the idea that they will win. Because history tells us that one of you is going to be wrong.
And I think if you're listening to this today and you're nowhere, not even thinking about court yet, and you're negotiating with letters or you're attending mediation, it is never too soon to have the discussion with your lawyer about how much they would charge you if you have to go to court. To have that in the back of your mind before mediation, to have that in the back of your mind as you're negotiating through letters, because if you know, gosh, going to court's going to cost this much and I'm just going to have to cave, it could help your negotiation and your thought processes at the mediation. And I think sometimes people don't think about court until it's too late. And then they go, I wish I'd known how much court was going to cost because I would have done things differently at mediation. Not everyone, but there are some people.
There's a lot.
Have that conversation with your lawyer. Ask them, what are their fees for court? How much is it going to cost to file? How much is it going to cost to do those things? So you know at least what you potentially could be in for. Now, the next one, Mum, that you say reason people settle is that they may be liable for the costs of their ex's legal fees as well as their own legal fees. Go to court, so they prefer to settle instead.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's the other thing that is a win in the court. You can have a win in the court on costs, and that's sort of black and white, and there's a number. You can have a win or you can have a loss. So the risk is if you go to court on a case, that's a bit risky, and you've got your legal fees. Like you said, you've sat down and worked it all out and you know what it's going to cost you. You need to also factor in that you might have to pay the other side's legal fees. Because although in family law people are generally expected to pay their own costs, there are circumstances more and more these days where the judges are considering making one person pay the other one's legal fees if their conduct hasn't been satisfactory. And that will change your cost-benefit analysis. Gosh.
Yeah.
And you don't know what their lawyers are charging. So it might not just be a repeat of yours, but, there could be cost consequences.
That's terrifying. And look, we're not trying to scare people away from going to court because there's valid reasons to go, but it is important, like if you're walking across a field, if there's landmines, you'd want to know that they're there. You want to know what you're up against potentially.
Yep.
So costs is a thing where you pay for your ex's legal fees, which would be really terrifying. But Mum, you said based on conduct. So usually you got to be pretty naughty or...
Well, yes, you could have played up like not making disclosure or refusing to agree to something that was sensible. But it also could be that you just don't win, that your case wasn't a proper case that should have gone to the court. And so that's assessments you need to make all the time.
So that's something people should be asking their lawyer always. Will this make me liable for costs? Will I end up having to pay my ex's legal fees if we do this? That's something you should be exploring.
Yeah. And you know what, though? A lot of lawyers send letters to the other side, and we heard of one, didn't we, this morning? Send a letter to maybe you guys, says, we'll seek indemnity costs and giving a weird deadline. So indemnity costs are when you pay all of their legals. But the normal cost order is party costs. So it's probably about a third or a half of what they've spent, but it's still significant.
Especially
so if you go to court and you've got all of those risks, you really are taking your chances.
Look, and everyone's situation is different. Of course, see a lawyer. Don't make any decisions based off this podcast. But if you would like to listen to our episode on costs and Calderbank
offers. CALDERBANK.
I'll put a link for that episode in the show notes. You can learn a bit more about costs there.
There's Section 117 offers usually in the family court.
That's what we're about to talk about next. So reasons people settle, Section 117 offers have been made. So this is for Australian family law. What is the Section 117 offer and why doesn't it have a better name?
Because it's the family court and the Family Law Act, and there's nothing snazzy about that.
No.
So it just rolls off the tongue, doesn't? Oh, it's a Section 117C offer. Oh, yes. So anyway, with Section 117C of the Family Law Act of Australia says that one of the factors that might make a court consider ordering someone to pay their ex's legal fees is that an offer has been put to them, which is as either better than what that person ultimately got or the same as what that person who made the offer ultimately got. And if that's happened, then you may be liable to pay their legal fees.
So you're saying if you said, hey, I'm offering you $100, so the property pool, whatever, $100, take $100, please take $100. Here's my offer, 117. You get 100 in writing. You get $100. I'm offering you $100, and they don't take it. You end up going to court. You're in it for 3 years, which obviously would never happen over $100. And then the court rules that they get $100. You could be then like, but I offered that 3 years ago. What the heck? And that's when they could make them liable for costs because you made that offer.
Yep, you can say to the court, look, see, I made this offer way back in October 24, and the only reason we're here now in 2027 is because that person, the other guy, is unreasonable. The court, I think, it used to be a good threat to people and it used to make people behave themselves, but I think the court is leaning more and more to cost consequences if an offer's been made and you haven't accepted it.
If your lawyer mentions that you have an offer 117C section blah, 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 ask them the legal ramifications. What are your likelihood of getting that in court anyway? And just really think about it hard because that is a reason why people settle.
Yep. And when I would send an offer under section 117C, I knew that the lawyer on the other side knew all about that. But I didn't know that their client knew all about it. And so I would always, in the old days of paper ones, I'd staple section 117C to the letter, to the offer, or now I'd attach it and send it over as part of the letter so that even if the lawyer was all gung-ho, their client was aware of the risks.
Right.
So it gives you pause. It gives you pause. Yeah.
Okay. Now, here are some bad outcomes that people settle for and the reasons they do it. So these are, they get offered something that's atrocious, nowhere near what they're entitled to, but they settle anyway.
Yes.
And one of the reasons you say is they run out of money.
Yes, that's true. With the way the court runs at the moment, it's pretty front heavy in terms of you do all of your disclosure early. There's mediations, conferences, first return, interim hearings. And a lot of people have a lawyer for all of those. But when it comes up to trial, they get an advice from a lawyer that's going to cost $80,000, $100,000, $150,000 for trial. And they go, what? I haven't got any money. And then they look, well, if I accept this, then I don't have to go to court. So they just simply run out of money.
So that is a cautionary tale to people. Like we, of course, do not recommend anyone accept a bad outcome, but we're just saying reasons why people do. And one of them is you run out of money. Yeah. And as you've said, Mum, it's very expensive. And now that the court is so focused on trying to keep you out of court, the cost is getting more costly out of court.
Yeah.
So that's
on.
Yeah. So you really have to be across how much is stuff costing you? Can you do some of it yourself? Can you do our cause? Can you get some community legal help and save your dollars for when it really matters? Of course, we always say go and see a lawyer at the beginning to know where you stand and always see a lawyer before you sign anything. But so many people run out of money before they get to court and just be mindful of that.
Before they get to trial.
Yeah, sorry, before the trial. Now, we have some great strategies for anyone who may be in that situation. It's called balancing the unbalanced, where potentially your ex has lots of money and you have none. So you can listen to that episode where Mum talks about how you can make it a bit more even. Now, Mum, the other one you said is they're bullied or pressured, or they're so used to doing everything that they're told.
I think I've seen this a lot in people who come out of coercive, controlling relationships. Yeah. They are kind of a bit used to being told what they're told. That they're hearing from their ex who was all powerful during the relationship. You're an idiot if if you think you're getting this, you're not getting anything, and your lawyer's no good, and all of these things just destabilize the person, and they get pressured into it by their ex. Or I'll always look after the kids. Just sign this, and then the kids, if they're older, can often gang up as well to get you to sign something and agree. And
so it's just
bullied.
A really danger time for people to get bullied into that is right at the beginning stage where they haven't got their head around everything and they haven't seen a lawyer and they're not really sure and they just the right thing. They don't want to be seen, they don't want to be seen as that person who is angry and bitter and won't settle and wants to fight, because there is a stereotype of the divorcee who, they always say, oh, she or he or they are just jealous. They're just angry and bitter and they won't let go. So I do feel people really don't want to be labelled like that. So they want to do everything right. They want to make it smooth. But don't be bullied or pressured by other people, what other people think. or by your ex. You've got to do what's right for you because it's your life. Forget what other people think about you.
Yeah. And part of that process, Laura, I think, is looking inward and thinking about it. I think some people settle. I know I've switched back to settle, but they do it because they are good people and they want to have a dignified separation. And I guess the converse of that, the opposite of that, is that they won't settle because they want to keep on fighting.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the last one, the reason people settle is they feel guilty, which kind of again comes on with that worrying about what other people think, worrying about what their ex thinks. Maybe they're the one that left, maybe they're the one that's cheated or whatever has caused the relationship to break up, but they feel guilty, so they settle for an unreasonable bad outcome because they feel guilty. So be mindful. Are you doing things because you feel guilty? That's something you need to check with your psychologist or your friends. Don't make decisions based on emotion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess sometimes people don't settle because they're angry.
Well, let's get into that, Mum. We haven't got there yet, Mum.
I'm jumping the queue. Okay, sorry.
So, Mum, let's get into reasons people don't settle. And there's some good reasons and there's some bad reasons. So let's talk about the good reasons why people don't settle. So this is people who are not accepting offers or people who are going, no, I'm going to go to court. I'm going to keep fighting this out. One of the reasons is you say they don't know the law.
That's right. So people don't prepare for a separation. We don't have casual education throughout our lives. So you have to deliberately try and inform yourself about the law, about divorces and separations. And sometimes the law is not going to agree with what you think you should get. So if they don't know the law, they think they're within their rights to not settle.
And I think there's a lot of myths about divorce law out there. There's a lot of things that people think, well, that's a no-brainer. Of course I get to keep my super. Of course I get, like I brought this money and I take it out. So there's all these kind of things that they are floating around in there. And we've got a great episode called Divorce Myths that you might want to go and listen to. But if you don't know the law, that's a good reason not to settle. You need to go and see a lawyer. You need to find out where you stand. So that's what some people have done. Everybody's situation is different. We are not saying do not settle. We're saying go find that every situation is different. But if you don't know the law, you don't know, right? So you need to find out. Now, the other reason people don't settle that you've seen in the past, Mum, is that they don't have full disclosure. Full disclosure. It's like banging your head against a wall. And we have countless people who have this problem.
Yeah,
so
they don't get
that a good that is a reason why people don't settle.
It is a reason people don't settle. And I wish that we didn't say full disclosure quite so often and it was relevant disclosure, because you don't really need to know how much they spent when they went to Bribey or went to Tassie or went overseas. You don't need to know that. What you need to know is the relevant information, which is, what did you have? And just look at those things. So you should try to contain your seeking for disclosure, I think, to the facts that will change your mind. But some people don't settle because they haven't got every single bit of the puzzle.
Some people don't settle maybe because they just don't have any disclosure. So there's two ends of it. There's two ends. Right. People that want too much and there's the people that don't have any.
Yeah. If you've got no disclosure, how can you settle? Right? And I wouldn't imagine many people would settle in that situation. But there might be a point somewhere between no disclosure and full disclosure where it's enough disclosure. And from that, you can confidently work out what your entitlement is. And the test, I guess, for that might be, so the judge is going to have the information that you put in your affidavits. Is that enough information for a person to make a judgment about a just and equitable settlement? Or is there some very obvious hole in the evidence that you need to fill and you need to get it from the other person? And so what is adequate disclosure goes up and down the scale depending on what's at stake. You wouldn't turn yourself in let's say $40,000 property pool and there's a bank statement missing and you've got no reason to believe there was any more money ever than for you. you might settle on that and let the rest slide. But if there's millions and you suspect or know that there's like, on this day, this is this much money, and on that day it was gone, and the statement in the middle's missing, then that's probably worth going to town about, maybe going to court about.
But go and see a lawyer, as each individual situation
Absolutely.
is different. This is just a discussion about reasons we've seen people not settle.
No.
So always go get your legal advice. Now, Mum, we've got a couple of bad reasons. We call them bad reasons that people don't settle. And one is they get this number in their head or a percentage in their head, and they want that regardless of what the law actually says.
Yeah.
Do you see a lot of that happening?
I see so much of that. It's what people need. It's what they'll say, I need this much to get a house in this area, and I'll need this much to get the kids to school. Therefore, I want this much. Whereas the court actually works on entitlements of each of you. They don't care what your fantasy is. If you want to keep the house, and therefore your share of the property pool would need to be this high for you to keep the house, that often is not going to sway the court. If a house gets sold, has to be sold to satisfy both people's claims, it does get sold. The court will order it. And I was reading a case only just yesterday where the court said, although we are sad, we understand that this one of the people didn't want to sell the property. The reality is the court has to do justice and equity between both parties. And to do that, they had to sell the house, even though, someone was in it. So don't think when you go to court that what you want is necessarily going to be playing on the judge's mind, because they're also thinking about the other person.
Mm. So I think we do see some people, and people make this mistake when they start discussing percentages with their ex right at the beginning of breakup, saying, oh, we'll definitely do 50-50, we'll definitely split it half and half, and we'll be fair. And then eventually they go and see a lawyer and they find out, wait, I'm entitled to like 60% or even more, and they change their mind. And the other person said, no, you said 50-50, you said that, and we're not changing it. So we've got an episode on discussing why a percentage discussions is a bad idea in the beginning.
It's a bad idea.
So we'll put that link in the show notes. But really, got to be really mindful of what you're saying, and at the beginning and anyway through it, until you really know what you're entitled to. Because you or your ex can get stuck with this idea in their head, and it is very hard to move.
The other thing is that some people can't see the future for themselves. They can't imagine their future. And so their plan is to not settle and perhaps stay in the house for as long as they can. But the reality is, if it's the case that the house is going to have to be sold, it'll end up being sold anyway, but they'll have had all these legal fees leading up and the delay. So I can understand why people are so worried.
Well, it's hard, and I know everyone listening today will know this, to go from probably a double income wage or whatever, living a certain lifestyle, to then having it cut in half, basically, or taken away, and then understanding in your head that you may have to live a little bit less extravagantly, or, some things you might not be able to do anymore for a while. And getting that into your head is really hard, because you don't want to do that. You want to keep living the way you've always lived, but don't let that be the reason that you are stuck. So you've got to, like Mum said, see a new future for yourself. Your life is not going to be the same, sadly. It is going to be different, but maybe for the best, that you just don't know it yet. Like, who would have thought? I'm loving my life way more. It's a surprise to me. It'll be a surprise to you. But if you can see your future, if you can plan a new future, a new way of living, and then that way you're not stuck on this number of somehow trying to figure out how you can keep having it all the way you've always had it, you will be able to move on a little bit easier. But Mum, next, they are angry. People don't settle because they're angry.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not giving them any of this because I worked for it, or I'm not giving them any of that money because that was my inheritance, or how dare they cheat and leave me like this? They're not going to benefit from that. So that all these hurt feelings.
We see a lot of people with those messages from their ex saying, if you leave me, I'm going to make you suffer. So that is a reason why some of them don't settle. And then The next one, I think, that goes on from that is they want to continue the abuse. So it could be a post-separation abuse situation. And if that's you, please call 1-800-RESPECT. If you feel triggered, please call Lifeline. But Mum, the post-separation abuse aspect is a huge reason why people don't settle.
Yeah, it's massive. And they might love to keep the other person on a string and lead them on, and they continue to have the fight. And if they write something to you through the lawyer, you have to answer because it's legal stuff. And yeah, I can see that people would do that.
So I think with post-separation abuse, I think one of the things I see a lot of the time is it's to the judge that there's like these little quotes or whatever, and it says it's not a high conflict court case. It's a court case with someone not willing to settle because they want to continue the post-separation abuse. And I do think a lot of people out there are stuck in a situation they don't want to be in. They want to settle, they want to get out, and they want to get away, but their ex is holding on with all their last little tentacles to keep control. And then I guess, Mum, that leads on to the next one that you were just about to mention is they don't want it to end. Whether it's abusive or not, they could just be like they just don't want the relationship to be over. They still haven't come to the realization they don't want it to end.
Yeah, that's right. And we used to say that there's no hope for a marriage once the house is sold, or it was so that last little vestige of separating your property is very hard to do, and it's very hard on you if you really don't want the relationship to end, or if you're a person who's been coercively controlling someone, your partner, all these years, then that would be the last bit of power you had over them. Once they agreed with their property, then the kids until they're 18, and then it's definitely they're out of that person's clutches. So, yes, it's a weird situation.
And I guess the last one is they're in denial.
So I see in denial on both sides of the game. The person who has stuff, who's got the best prospect to the most assets, denies that, in denial about having to give any of it to the other person. They deny what's going on in the relationship, whether it's abuse or whether they both worked for something. And then the person who's not got as much property who's looking to get some from the other person, like you said, is in denial about their future standard of living and that this is all going to end and that I have to live a different life from now on. And that, it's weird, isn't it? Because counselling and time usually get people to the right position. But the new structure of the way the family court, Federal Circuit Family Court of Australia progresses matters is having people into mediation pretty quickly when all of these emotions are probably still running around in your head. And it's hard to be making rational decisions before you even go to court. I think the reason matters used to settle on the door of the court, like people would end up agreeing after fighting for 2-3 years, was the first point at which everyone knew what the cases were and they'd had time to cool down. They knew what the facts were, the dollars, and then they could make a sensible adjustment. So the court's trying to shift that scenario to the beginning of the process. But what they can't shift is a person's mindset and a person's capacity to accept it's over. So, yes, it's hard. It's really hard.
And I think it's important for everyone to know that whether you can settle or can't settle, whether it's a stressful situation, I think it would be for everyone, but it's not right or wrong. It's not good or bad. If that's the way it is, that's the way it is. Don't beat yourself up about it.
No.
Be mindful of these things to make sure they're not roadblocking you from getting a good outcome or from getting a settlement or from going to court or whatever it is that you need to do. These are just things that we've seen that have been the reason why people have settled or not settled. And look, when it comes down to it, once you settle, you think, yay, it's done. And to a degree it is, but you've also got to then follow through and get all the court orders and do all the things it says to do. So it's nearly done when you settle.
And you've got to be able to live with it. But having said that, it may be that what the law is and what the law says you're going to get, you don't think you can live with. But that's you're just going to have to, if that's what if the court ordered that ultimately, you would have to live with it. So find out where you stand, talk to your lawyers, make sure that you've considered each of these aspects. Like Laura said, we've opened it up so that people can think about their own situation, and maybe there's some recognition of something there that they can work on.
And have you had to have hard talks with some of your clients because you can see these types of things happening?
I think that's what makes me a good lawyer. I think I was a good lawyer because you have to have those hard conversations with your clients. Your client comes in, they want the moon and the stars, they're upset, they're entitled. And your job is not to pander to them and not to say, oh, yes, we'll get you that. We'll try. Your job is to say, look, I think your chances of exactly that are pretty slim. And here's the reasons why. Read these cases. This is what we do for people here. That you guys can read cases. You're not stupid. And you can look at it and you go, oh, I can see how the land lies. And so I do those I always did those hard conversations.
So you need to make sure you're having those hard conversations with your lawyer. And if your lawyer's not having hard conversations with you, if they always agree to everything you say and always just hurry along like a little puppy behind you,
what's the point?
Why are they not giving you a little bit of pushback? Because obviously they know the law better than you. So it's a
two-way street.
It's a fine line, and it is a two-way street. And that's why it's so important if you haven't got a lawyer yet. We've done an episode on, I think it's 8 questions to ask your lawyer before you sign up with one. Go and listen to that episode. And we've also got one on red flags in a lawyer and what to look for. If you're having trouble with your lawyer, go and listen to that one. We talk about how you can swap if they've got those issues. But today was a bit of a funny one, and I'm sorry, Mum, that we kind of had to be a bit elusive about this because we don't want anyone suing us saying, I didn't settle because I heard this podcast episode, or I did settle because I heard this podcast episode. That's not what the point of this is. The point of this is to just run through scenarios so that you understand reasons people do and reasons people don't. And maybe you can get in your ex's head a little bit and understand what's going on with them.
Yeah. And it was courageous of you, Laura, to do this episode because of our concerns about people just running off and following the choices they've made or following our suggestions or whatever other people have done. But no one else is talking about this. And that's why we thought we should really just run through it, because at the heart of every property settlement is, what will you settle on?
Do I settle or do I not? That's pretty much it what it comes down to.
It's pretty binary, it is.
It's a hard question, but make sure when you're doing those decisions, you've considered these things. So thank you, Mum, for your time. Please don't sue us because we haven't told you any legal advice at all, but we do love you all very much. And a little bit of a hard chat and a hard truth sometimes doesn't hurt when going through this. So thank you, Mum, for your time, and we'll see you guys next week.
You're welcome, Laura. Bye, everyone.
If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general only and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording.